Hey folks, how's it going? So today we are going to talk a little bit about leadership again, but this time we're going to talk about leadership perspectives and the different perspectives that are out there for leadership. So last time it was styles, and styles will be definitely incorporated into this, but this will actually be about the different perspectives that are out there in general. So it's kind of broader. Um, So one perspective is the trait perspective on leadership, and this is definitely an outdated perspective on leadership. But basically, with this perspective, you have a situation where you have leaders who are, they're basically people are measuring leaders by things that really aren't useful, like how tall they are, their gender, their religion, and this can lead to some bad choices. And but we did used to prescribe to this, but it's definitely an outdated style. And if you look at this style, one of the things was to look at like kind of the way they came up with this was to look at what the current leaders were like. And one of the things they noticed about, like for example, the presidents is that they were tall and they were male, and they tended to be, at least as far as we knew, outwardly anyway, um, their sexual orientation was straight. They were heterosexual, in other words. If you want to use that term. And straight, I don't know. I don't try not to use that too much, but anyway, yeah, they were heterosexual. Um, they were, uh, they tended to be Christian and not Catholic. All those things, and George Washington fit those characteristics for the most part. Um, Obviously, that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense to pick a leader based on those characteristics. But they did in those days, and they would even have applications that ask you questions about that stuff when you're applying for a job, a leadership job. All right. Um, and if you look at the Mount Rushmore, most of the presidents tend to fit into that category. They're white, they're heterosexual, they're male, they're Christian, not Catholic, etc. And then it came along President Nixon. This is Richard Nixon. He had all the characteristics. He was tall, straight, Christian, etc. But and then he was also very, very corrupt, and he lied to the country about Watergate, and it made people stop and say, well, you could have all those characteristics, and we need to look beyond that. So we started getting into some other perspectives and getting away from that, and starting to look at women leaders like Madeleine Albright, and then all in other countries they have like presidents that are women, but we hadn't had any female presidents. So we started to open ourselves up a little bit. And that's where you end up with to a certain extent opening yourself up to Barack Obama. Here's Barack Obama with his mom, and he was a good example of somebody that he was a good president, I think, and he uh, he didn't necessarily fit into the stereotype of being a white male. You know, so gets away from that idea that you have to be a white male to be a leader. And so, yeah, the trait perspective, definitely we've left that in the past, but it is something to be aware of because we fall into it sometimes. We can fall back into it. Like with Donald Trump, tall and all those things. A lot of people. Bernie Sanders was a presidential candidate, and some folks had an issue with him being Jewish. People were discriminatory against him and had an issue with that, and that kind of thing. So you know we're moving forward, but we still have a long ways to go. Hillary Clinton certainly faced a lot of sexism when she ran for president, and that's an example of how we're still stuck in the old ways. Okay, next up, let's talk about the functional perspective. With the functional perspective, what we're basically saying is the leader can be a leader, and all they have to do is meet certain functions. And so it doesn't matter how tall you are or anything like that, but if you meet these certain functions, you can do it. And so this is the functional perspective, and we have the task leadership aspects of it, which are initiating, coordinating, summarizing, and elaborating. And those are, you can just imagine what those are, but those are very similar to the things we studied at the beginning of this semester with Benny and Sheets. But the initiating, just, contributing new ideas, Coordinating, taking other people's ideas and bringing them together, summarizing, basically, if you hear a discussion and you notice there's a lot of points, like summing it all up for everybody so they can really wrap their brain around it, and then elaborating, like taking an idea and then running with it. I have a football player with a ball, taking that idea, somebody says something and say, hey, that's a great idea, let's do a skit or whatever it is, and then kind of adding some more ideas to their initial idea. So that's the functional perspective, and then within that, that's the task leadership functions that people can do. And if the idea here is, if you do these functions, you can actually, you can, if you do those functions, you can become a great leader. You don't have to be a certain height or whatever. And you can see that with, in the case of the stoner character in the Breakfast Club, he rose up as a leader, even though he didn't necessarily have a lot of the characteristics we would expect. Just through basically taking on leadership functions, he was able to become a leader, even though by his appearance he didn't look like an obvious choice. He had long hair and smoked and kind of disheveled, etc. Okay, so also in the functional perspective is the more touchy-feely side of things, the process leadership. This is the more humanistic aspects, and within that is the releasing tension, which just can be cracking a joke, getting donuts for the group, maybe doing an exercise with them that's fun. Gatekeeping, this is where you find people that are just a little too noisy in the group and get them to kind of quiet down and let other people talk. Quieting the overly talkative people so other people have a chance to talk. Encouraging, just encouraging people, like being their cheerleaders, cheering them on, and then mediating when there's conflict, helping people to see common ground and settle their conflicts. And a lot of times people are disagreeing with each other, but in fact they agree. It's just they disagree about the way to achieve the goal, and they lose sight of that. So the mediator kind of operates on this idea of common ground. We talked already in my other lecture about leadership styles, the democratic versus the authoritarian versus laissez-faire, but just to review those, with the democratic style, what we're talking about is like getting other people's ideas and incorporating them into the group, listening to other people, and really letting other people talk and have a say in the leadership. Authoritarian is just the opposite, where you basically the leader makes the decision by themselves and not a lot of input from others. The advantage of the authoritarian is it's very very efficient, but it sometimes leads to bad decisions. Democracy can lead to very high quality decisions, but it can be very time consuming and sometimes can take too long. And then the laissez-faire is where you sort of stand back and let people do whatever they want to do. And a lot of times this works if you have people that are motivated and know what they're doing and are self-directed and self-managing. It can turn into chaos though if you don't have the right employees or the employees don't have the background. So anyway, see my other lecture for those, but those are some leadership styles that are out there. In the movie 12 Angry Men, you will actually see like different leadership styles play themselves out when you watch the film, if you get a chance to watch it or just read the screenplay. It's a really great example of all the different leadership styles. One of the things is you do see a lot of democracy coming out of this Henry Ford character, the architect, as they like to call him in the movie. Okay, next up we have the Hershey's situational leadership model, and then with this model, basically what you have is a situation where you have people going through and sort of seeing what the situation is for the group. Like what they're basically arguing is like the leadership that works in a group depends on the situation, so you have to be very aware of the situation. And so with the telling version of this this type of leadership, the telling one is that you tell people what to do. This is where a lot of times the people this would be a situation where you have people that don't know what to do and they don't have a lot of background, so you have to just tell them what to do. And then with selling, what you do is you actually just sell people on the idea. So you're not just telling them what to do anymore, but you're selling them on that idea and telling them why it's a good idea to do it a particular way. Don't just assume they're going to automatically agree with you. And then participating is where you actually start to get some more democracy going and letting other people's opinion come in. And finally, delegating, letting other people lead. So I think of this like the example I always think about is like if you're opening a new restaurant and you have a bunch of employees that don't have a lot of experience in the restaurant industry, you could start off by telling them a bunch of stuff. Just telling them what to do, telling them what to do. They just need that because they don't really know much. And then eventually you'll need to sell them on an idea, like so they don't feel like you're just telling them to do it for the heck of it, but you actually sell them on this idea. And so the example there would be something like, like if they're wondering why you don't put customers in the far end of the restaurant, where in a section that's closed at that point because it's a not a busy time of the day, they might not understand that. So you have to tell them on this idea like, oh, the food will get cold while you walk across, or you might miss that customer group because they're off on the side. So that's why, don't let the customers sit anywhere they want in the restaurant. You can close off a section of a restaurant. So, that kind of thing. And then over time, participating, actually getting input from them. So, for example, you might ask employees, like, what are some new menu items? And they might have ideas like a vegan burger or a gluten free burger or an organic burger, just new ideas, just opening it up to suggestions with the menu, for example. Excuse me. And then the last thing is delegating. There might be a time when you can actually take a day off and take, one of your best workers in the restaurant and have him be the manager for the day, and you can go to the beach or to go hiking or something. So that's the idea. So those are your those situational leadership models. I mean, the idea of Hershey was to like really let people like determine what works best depending on the situation. Next up, we have transformational leadership versus transactional leadership. Transactional leaders are leaders that basically take input from their followers. Transformational is a little different. With transformational, you're actually looking to where the organization needs to go to survive in the future. So, for example, if are again running a restaurant and you notice that things are changing in the neighborhood. People want different things. They want maybe they want boba drinks. Maybe they want like we were talking about earlier, organic foods. They want gluten-free foods. They want maybe they would like to have some vegan foods or whatever. So just sort of seeing where the industry is headed and not losing sight of that. And this is really important. Like Blockbuster used to be how people got their videos, and then the reason that Netflix was able to take over was because they figured out a new way to distribute videos through the mail initially, and then eventually through streaming, and Blockbuster was sort of left behind. So just kind of seeing where the industry is going. So the transformational leaders are able to sort of see where we're going in the future. The only problem is if the leader's so busy and stressed out and you're understaffed, it's hard to think about innovation. So and then again, the transactional leaders are the ones that are willing to get input from their group, but they don't necessarily see a vision for the future. They have some input, but it's not a long-term plan for the future. So yeah, so those are our leadership. That's our leadership lecture for the different perspectives that are out there. And yeah, hope you enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions about leadership and different leadership aspects of leadership.